Hello everyone. As we previously discussed about the fat, and that's essential part of our nutrition and it's a very important macronutrient that we should use. The question remains what type of fat we should use and what type of fat we should avoid. The answer to that question is, trust me, not easy. And it really comes down to the structure of fat, because then I have to give you a little bit of crash course on chemistry. Fats are basically a long chain of molecules of carbon atoms connected to each other, which are comprised of carbon and hydrogen. On one end of these molecules, we have carboxylic acid. On the other side, we basically have a CH3 group, which we call an omega group. You might have probably heard about omega-3, omega-6, omega-9, all this, and that's where it comes from. If connected with one bond, chemical bonds, that is called a saturated fat. Basically, these fats are mostly found in animal sources, such as butter, all the fat that we get from beef and lamb. But these are the primary source of saturated fat, and also coconut oil. Coconut oil is also a significant source of saturated fat. Saturated fat, through many studies, have been known to be linked with elevated low density lipoprotein, or LDL, which is bad cholesterol in our body, which is why traditionally our doctors, when they look at our blood panel and our cholesterol level, if the cholesterol level is high, especially if our LDL level is high, they usually advise us on cutting down on the amount of red meat that we use because it's linked with saturated fat. Also, they ask us to use less butter because it also has saturated fat. Now let's go back to that chemistry. Long chain of carbon atoms. If we have a double bond, then that automatically that fat becomes unsaturated. If there's only one of these CC carbon double bonds, we call them mono. Comes from Latin, means one. Mono unsaturated fat. This mono unsaturated fat, which usually happens on carbon number 9 of the atoms, hence omega-9, usually found in oleic acid, which is the main component of olive oil, avocado, macadamia nuts. These three are the major source of omega-9 or oleic acid. This is called the mono unsaturated fat. These are the best fat that basically you can use, and a lot of research have shown that consuming these type of fat usually lowers the LDL. So in fact, it's actually these type of fats are better for you. They also actually help you lose more weight and lose more fat. They're very healthy. Another type of fat that we have to talk about, that's trans fat. Think about it. Where have you probably heard of this type of fat? Anybody who's been talking about chips or fries or any other type of processed food that has been deep fried have probably told you about that. And anything that you've heard about this type of fat is completely true. They're completely harmful for you. They're carcinogenic. They are a byproduct of a very high temperature chemical process that happens to the oils. Avoid them at any cost, and any product that you know of that has trans fat, please do not use them, as they're extremely harmful and they're carcinogenic. Like I said, they could really affect your health adversely. The information we just provided might be a bit overwhelming and confusing. So to summarize, saturated fat mostly comes from animal sources. So try to have a grass-fed organic type of saturated fat, coconut oil, and also mono unsaturated fats such as avocado, olive oil, and macadamia nuts. So these are the type of fat that you want to consume, in addition to omega-3 from salmon, sardines, and mackerel. These are the type of fats that you also should consume. So these are pretty much the fats that have been known and have been very well studied in the literature, and we know that they're very good for your health. So when we talk about fat being good and healthy for you, we're talking about these type of fats. You may have heard a lot about people telling you to use nuts, for instance, pistachio, walnuts, almonds, hazelnuts, macadamia nuts. It's like, these are so good because these are good fat. Is it true or not? Well, it's complicated. The thing is that you should not really consume these nuts without any limits, thinking that they're all really good fat. What I would encourage you to do is go on Google and try to type in whatever nuts you want to put in the name, and then followed by fatty acid profile. See what kind of fat that nut is made up of. If it has so much omega-6, 6 is probably not good. You should not really consume too much of it. You see, just because they're nuts and they come from a tree and they're natural, it doesn't make them good for you. It doesn't make them necessarily healthy for you. I'll give you an example. Walnut, the majority of the fat in it comes from omega-6. Consuming too much walnuts will exceed the allowed daily intake of omega-6 for you. So you should not really consume too much of it. On the other hand, almonds has almost zero amount of omega-3, which is not really a good profile for you. So the ratio of omega-3 to omega-6 is something that we also care about. We want this ratio to be maximum, to be as high as possible. The nuts that I personally recommend is macadamia nuts because it's almost 70 to 80% of oleic acid, which is the same structure as olive oil. This is very, very good type of fat that you should consume. But you should really be careful when consuming too much of walnuts or almonds, other types of like Brazilian nuts. It's a good information for yourself, good knowledge for yourself to just go online and look at the fatty acid profile of any type of fat that you want to consume. This way you don't really have to ask other people what you should use, what is healthy, what is not healthy. So basically you have a good understanding of what type of fatty acids you're basically putting into your body. And that really comes down to this: how much of monounsaturated fat, polyunsaturated fat, saturated fat, trans fat you are consuming. And by the way, just want to reiterate, the polyunsaturated fat could be both omega-3 and omega-6. In other words, omega-3 and omega-6 are both polyunsaturated fat. So if somebody tells you that polyunsaturated fats are good because they're unsaturated, that's not necessarily true, because you have to ask what type of polyunsaturated fat it is. Is it omega-3, which is good, or is it omega-6, which is not so good? I hope that was helpful for you to understand what type of fat you should consume, how you should manage your intake of calories through fats.